Yellow train! Now, we haven't staged this. This is actually just pulled into the station, and these are actually very rare, these yellow Shinkansens. It's quite a privilege to see them.
That is really nice. It's so smooth.
You forgot to do something. Hazelnut crumbs.
I have 6 to 10 shots underneath me right now.
Inspiring travel. Watch now on the BBC and iPlayer.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Tens of thousands of Palestinians are making their way back to northern Gaza after Hamas said over 300,000 returned on Monday. This is the scene there live. Officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo say the army has now forced rebel groups out of most of the city of Goma. Rebels say they're still in control. The Serbian Prime Minister has resigned following months of protests across the country. The UK government rejects a call to extend the definition of extremism, which could have included conspiracy theorists and misogynists. A shock in the bathroom will reveal what happened when a woman in northern England found a snake in her toilet bowl. Hello, welcome. I'm Martine Croxall. On Monday, according to Hamas officials, more than 300,000 displaced Palestinians moved from southern parts of Gaza, where they've been seeking shelter from the war, back to northern Gaza. The movement of people is continuing today. These are the live pictures where, once again, many people are travelling by foot, carrying possessions with them. The movement back to the north was agreed under the ceasefire deal. Many people say they're returning to find that their homes have been destroyed or looted. Our correspondent Nick Beak is following developments from Jerusalem and told us about the journeys many Palestinians are making as they return home.
We're getting some really vivid accounts of people who've made the trip from the south back to the north. They set off, they say, with great expectations and hope that finally they're able to go back to their neighbourhoods after 15 months of war. But so many people are saying that actually when they turn the corner, they get back to the streets that they knew. There's nothing remaining of their houses. In some cases, maybe just one room is still standing, a fragment of the house that they knew. Lots of people are saying this, and also the lucky ones are very much in the minority, those whose homes have been spared. At the same time, charities are saying that at the moment they've got an opportunity to bring in more aid. They've really boosted the amount of medicine and other supplies getting in, but there's a really big problem. They talk about the electricity and the water being these essentials that simply aren't there at the moment.
What help is there then available to them in terms of aid getting through?
Well, this is the big question, because as part of this ceasefire deal, which is for now holding, although it's fragile by nature, at least 600 trucks are supposed to be coming into Gaza every day. A week ago, just in the hours after the ceasefire came into effect, there was something like 900 trucks every day. That had fallen to around 300 last Friday. Not immediately sure why that is, but charities say they are bringing things in. I mean, emergency shelter is really important, and so we're talking about tents and in some cases caravans. These are seen as essential because people may well have gone home, if you put it like that, but their houses aren't there, and so shelter is really, really important for people in the days and weeks to come.
And Nick, from the Israeli side, the hostage releases, some of the worst possible news coming for some families who've been waiting so long.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've got 5 weeks left of this initial phase of the ceasefire deal. There are 26 hostages who are due to be released in that time, and the Israeli government saying yesterday that Hamas had given them information that 8 of those 26 hostages had died. It's worth pointing out that that figure had been reported quite widely in the Israeli media over the past couple of weeks or so. But clearly for those families, that is confirmation, as best as they can have it at this moment, information coming from Hamas, that their loved ones have been killed. As you were saying, the hostage exchange continues, and what we'll see is on Thursday 3 more hostages being released, and then another 3 at the weekend. And of course at the same time, lots of Palestinian prisoners currently in Israeli detention, in Israeli prisons, they will be released as well. So this quite complicated system, which of course took months to be arrived at, continues, and for now, despite this hiccup we saw at the weekend, it is progressing, Martine.
Nick Beak in Jerusalem. Government officials in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo say that the army has now forced rebel groups out of most of the city of Goma. That claim, though, is disputed by the M23 rebel group, which says it maintains control of much of the city. The US, the UK and France have accused neighbouring Rwanda of backing the M23 rebels, something which Rwanda denies. Let's speak to Gilles Faninu, who is the UNICEF Regional Director for Western and Central Africa. He was based in the Democratic Republic of Congo for over a decade and returned from the region a few weeks ago. Gilles, welcome to BBC News. Tell us what the situation is like now in Goma from what you're hearing.
I was in Goma a few months ago, and the situation was terrifying. Schools were closed, overloaded, children were not necessarily at school, health facilities were overwhelmed. Now the situation is just apocalyptic. We have seen the situation in Minova and in Sake that puts the population on the roads. They were trying to find a secure area when the situation has changed on Thursday, Friday in Goma. And what we are seeing now in Goma is that prisoners are free, no schools open, malnutrition is high. The country was responding to cholera and mpox outbreak. So the situation now there is just what we have not seen for decades. It's true that in 2012, we have seen a similar situation, and human rights group documented hundreds of rapes and extrajudiciary killings. Similar situation now is happening with a number of armed groups in Goma. We know the density of the population is very high. We have 3 million people in Goma. 1 million of them are displaced population, and we know among the displaced population we have 1/3 we have 70% who are children and women. So the situation is just apocalyptic there.
Gilles, who can help this situation? Who has the authority in this part of the country to help these people?
I mean, it is difficult for humanitarian needs, for us to have a response in terms of humanitarian needs. We need to have a minimum of security. But at the end of the day, neighboring countries and the regional, the diplomatic community need to do something about it. Because this is not only about Republic Democratic of Congo, but this is really a regional crisis. And a regional solution needs to be found. We are aware that diplomatic negotiation will restart, and we hope those negotiations will put at the heart of the discussion children who are suffering, women who are suffering and their families, so that we have a minimum of security to respond to the high humanitarian needs in Goma.
Gilles, why are these different groups trying to take control of Goma? Why is it an important city for them?
I mean, geopolitically, we know what, the capital of North Kivu is extremely important for those armed groups. You have a lot of wealth, mineral around in that province. And the development that we have seen on Thursday and on Friday was the one that triggered the fighting to take control of Goma. But what is really damaged here is that children are suffering, families are suffering, women are being raped, and that need to stop immediately.
Gilles Fanninou, we appreciate you talking to us. Thank you very much indeed. Gilles Fanninou from UNICEF.
You're welcome.
So breaking news. In the last hour, the Serbian Prime Minister Miloš Vučević has announced his resignation following months of mass demonstrations over the fatal collapse of a train station roof in November. 15 people died and there were allegations of widespread corruption. Let's speak to our Balkans correspondent, Guy Delaunay. Guy, talk to us about what's been happening over the last few weeks since that roof collapse.
Well, there have been a series of very large protests, including one last month which saw more than 100,000 people turn out on the streets of Belgrade, Serbia's capital. And by some reckoning, that was the biggest demonstration ever seen in Serbia. We just had another protest over the past 24 hours. Students blocked one of the busiest intersections in Belgrade for 24 hours. Again, part of this ongoing series of protests following that disaster at Novi Sad railway station in November. People have been very angry. They feel that people haven't taken accountability for that disaster, and they're asking whether corruption was responsible, and if so, who should be brought to account for that. That's all been rumbling away. One of the persistent demands of the protesters has been for the resignation of the Prime Minister, Mr. Vučević. And that's now occurred. And Mr. Vučević, in his statement when he resigned, said, we've had some sort of a fracture in this country. We've not been able to pull it back together. And in order to try to heal the current issue in the country, that's why he's resigning, to paraphrase what he said more or less.
The president had said there would be an urgent and extensive reconstruction of government. So how much further is this going to go beyond the Prime Minister?
Well, President Aleksandar Vučić has indicated there may be as many as half of the government ministers who will be replaced in a government reshuffle. And I think it's worth pointing out that in Serbia at the moment, the power lies with President Vučić. It does not lie with Prime Minister Vučević. Mr. Vučević was very much the president's appointee. He was somebody trusted that the president put in charge as head of government. But nobody's kidding themselves in Serbia that this means there's been a change at the very top. This is the change of the person who's been appointed by the president to carry out the president's directives. So that's what's happening at the moment. But it's interesting to note, of course, that nobody's been asking for the resignation of the president. Perhaps they feel that was a step they weren't going to get. But one of these persistent demands has been for the resignation of Mr. Vučević and for the mayor of Novi Sad. Both of those have now happened, and the government and the president will be hoping, doubtless, that this will ease some of those tensions that have been in the country over the past couple of months.
At the moment, thank you very much, Guy Delaunay, our Balkans correspondent. The UK government has rejected a call for the definition of extremism to be widened, meaning it will not include potentially violent environmentalists, conspiracy theorists and men who are prejudiced against women. The BBC has been told that the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, doesn't agree with the findings of a report that she commissioned last year and will maintain the focus on Islamist and far-right extremism. Well, Sir Keir Starmer has said the government is looking carefully at how it addresses extremism.
When it comes to extremism, it's very important that we are focused on the threat so we can deploy our resource properly, and therefore we're looking carefully at where the key challenges are. Obviously that's now informed with what I said last week in the aftermath of the Southport murders, where we've got the additional challenge, I think, of a sort of cohort of loners who are extreme, and they need to be factored in. So that's the focus. In the end, what this comes down to is safety and security of people across the United Kingdom, and that's my number one focus.
Our chief political correspondent Henry Zefferman gave us this update from Westminster.
I think we should dwell just briefly on the fact that this wasn't a report commissioned by some, or commissioned from some external body, a think tank or something like that. This was the Home Secretary asking her own officials, specialising in extremism to report on the nature of the extremist threat and the ways in which the government might need to adapt. And she has now rejected her own officials' findings. So that does appear to pose some questions for further down the track about how the Home Office operates and the nature of the officials and, frankly, whether the Home Secretary is satisfied with the advice she's getting from them. I'm told, by the way, having asked that question this morning, that she is. But look, if you zoom out, what is at stake here is a really interesting question about what extremism is in this day and age and how the government combats it. It's questions that Keir Starmer was posing of himself and of his government in that speech he gave last week after Axel Rudder-Cabana, the Southport killer, pleaded guilty. And those are questions which, regardless of what status this report now has, and it's been junked by the government, those are the questions that the government is going to have to return to again and again.
And of course, there's likely to be surely opposition from women's groups who say that misogyny isn't being taken seriously when we know that there are, according to the police statistics, about 3,000 violent incidents against women and girls every day. Absolutely. And as you suggest, misogyny was one of the, extreme misogyny was one of the things that the Home Office review, rapid analytical sprint as they're calling it, suggested should be taken into the ambit of extremism. I mean, there's two kinds of different criticisms of what this report appears to have suggested. One is an in principle criticism. So there are people who would say that actually very few of the things that are suggested in this report, misogyny, but also left-wing extremism, environmental extremism, fascination with conspiracy theories, should be classified as extremism. They may be serious issues, but there are people who say they just shouldn't be classified as extremism in principle because that could have a chilling effect on free speech and undermine more serious kinds of extremism. Obviously, there are others who would very much disagree with that, as you say. Then the other kind of criticism that you've also heard this morning are people who say, look, realistically, police and counter-terror resources being what they are, you couldn't expand this definition to the extent suggested by this report because it would just swamp those officials who are working on counter-extremism and result in people falling through the net. Henry Zeffman, around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. A public inquiry into the worst atrocity of the conflict in Northern Ireland, the Omagh bombing, is hearing evidence from relatives of the victims. 29 people, including a woman pregnant with twins, were murdered in an attack carried out by the group calling itself the Real IRA in August 1998. They detonated a bomb in the town's main shopping street. The senior counsel to the inquiry, Paul Greeny KC, said the Omagh bombing was an act of savagery and has been giving details about the significance of the splintering of the IRA to the subsequent events.
The final split within Republican paramilitaries is the one of greatest significance to the Omagh bombing. That is because it's the split that led to the emergence of the group that has become known as the Real IRA. And as everyone knows, the Real IRA has accepted responsibility for the bombing. This final split occurred as the result of discontent within dissident Republicans about the peace process that was to lead to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. So the peace process will be relevant to the work of the inquiry for several reasons. They include, first, the peace process, as we've explained, led to a process of security normalisation. As we said a moment ago, it will be important to understand whether that had any impact on the ability of dissident Republican terrorists to conduct their illegal activities, and, if it did, the inquiry will need to understand to what extent and with what consequences.
Paul Greeny, KC. Police have rearrested a woman in connection with a fatal car crash at a school in Wimbledon in southwest London in July 2023. Claire Fremantle, who's 48, is being questioned on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. She was originally arrested at the scene of the collision at Study Prep School, but police said she'd suffered an epileptic seizure, and the Crown Prosecution Service ruled at the time that she should face no further action. Selina Lau and Nuria Sajjad, who were both 8 years of age, died when a car crashed through a fence and collided with a building at the school. Their families raised concerns when no charges were brought, and the Metropolitan Police said it had carried out its own review and found lines of inquiry that required further examination. President Trump has signed several executive orders focused on reshaping the US military. One reinstates more than 8,000 service members who were discharged for refusing to get the COVID-19 vaccine. Another order has banned diversity, equality and inclusion initiatives in the military. Meanwhile, the US Justice Department has said that it has fired more than a dozen officials who were involved in the criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump. The acting Attorney General said they couldn't be trusted to faithfully implement the president's agenda. CBS correspondent Jared Hill has more on these matters from Washington.
With the reshaping of the U.S. military, there are a couple of things, and you mentioned these. One of the ones that's getting a lot of attention is this executive order that would essentially make it so that the Department of Justice or the Department of Defense has to create a new policy around transgender members serving in the military. The administration says a lot of this is around the notion or the idea that transgender members require certain levels of medical care or that may take them out of commission for working within the military. And so that's one thing that we're seeing there. They're also rolling back to what were some of the previous policies regarding transgender members. The question, though, you know, on a larger scale, is if this is the beginnings of a ban of openly serving transgender members in the military. The administration says that that's not the case currently, but some of the writing does appear to be on the wall.
And the Department of Justice having a bit of a clear out.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's one of those things that's not necessarily too surprising for the ways that President Trump had been talking about his desires to overhaul, in particular, the justice system as he was coming into office. Seeing here the really anyone that was working on those investigations into him during his time out of the White House, now they are out. So there are some questions around some of this, as well as getting rid of some of the inspectors general of whether there was enough time that was given. That is yet to be seen if that will end up being litigated throughout the court system. But right now, again, this is a part of the sweep that we are seeing President Trump executing that was promised well in advance.
And finally, for now, at least, President Trump having an impact on geography, or certainly names.
Yeah, the list is growing of things that we'll talk about. So that's one of the things that we really saw in Trump's speech during his inauguration is this desire to sort of physically reshape the Western Hemisphere, at least, around the United States, with renaming the Gulf of Mexico for him the Gulf of America, as well as renaming what was the largest mountain, the tallest mountain in the United States in Alaska, renaming that Mount McKinley, going back to this effort to physically put the American stamp on the map in ways that it maybe had not been before. Also, some of this goes back to some of the efforts and intentions by President Trump to, as he sees it, get rid of what he calls sort of woke changes to some of the maps, whether it's on the, the international scale or renaming or unrenaming various buildings and departments and whatnot throughout the United States. Again, this effort to go back to a time where things were not changed or renamed to honor marginalized peoples, marginalized communities, and bringing back the names that they had before. This is, again, part of this culture war that we're seeing President Trump really going full steam ahead with as he comes back into office.
Jared Hill from CBS. Google Maps has said that it will change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America once it's officially updated in the United States Geographic Name System. But the change will only happen in the US. In Mexico, the app will continue to call it the Gulf of Mexico. Everywhere else, it will carry both names. Renaming the Gulf of Mexico was one of President Trump's initiatives. The Brazilian football international Neymar has agreed to end his contract with the Saudi club Al Hilal 6 months before it was due to expire. The 32-year-old forward is poised for a return to his childhood club, Santos. It's understood that he wants to recapture his form ahead of next year's World Cup in the hopes of making the national team squad. Neymar has suffered a series of long-term injuries, only playing a few matches since joining the Saudi Pro League in August 2023. Where he earned $150 million a year. A 42-year-old woman and a 60-year-old man have been arrested after 2 Just Stop Oil protesters disrupted the West End performance of The Tempest, starring Sigourney Weaver in London. During the show, a man and a woman launched a confetti cannon on stage while holding an orange banner. They were guided off stage after less than a minute. Reports suggest several members of the audience booed the interruption to the performance. Now, the loo can sometimes be the only place you are guaranteed a bit of peace and quiet, but that's only if you remember to close the lid. A woman in Burnley in Lancashire got a rather nasty surprise when she found a huge snake slithering out of her toilet. She phoned the RSPCA to try to arrange a rescue for the corn snake, which is harmless to humans. But by the time they arrived, it had disappeared. But where? Check round the back of the sofa. This is BBC News.
Hello again. Storm Herminia is still across our shores, but not as potent as it was yesterday. So what's happening today is it's going to be fairly cloudy for most of us. There'll be blustery showers. You could catch one almost anywhere. The strongest winds will be across the Northern Isles and the southwest and southern parts of England, especially along the coasts. So this is the low pressure that is Storm Herminia, continuing to drift eastwards, but still with a rash of showers wrapped around it. Now, some of those showers will be heavy. You might even hear the odd rumble of thunder, and they could be wintry on higher ground in Scotland. But it should brighten up central and southern Scotland, possibly Northern Ireland, later Northern England. The gustiest winds, though, as you can see here, across the southwest and the south. Temperatures today, 7 to about 10 degrees, but if you're in a heavy shower and in that wind, it will feel cold. Now, through this evening and overnight, you can see how the low pressure moves away. Behind it, we see a clearance in the sky. Still a few showers around, especially across northern Scotland, but once again, there'll be wintry on higher ground. We could also see some mist and fog patches form in the south. But by the end of the night, the next system is waiting in the wings. And that system, this area of low pressure, a new one, is going to drift across southern counties tomorrow before slipping away southwards. So tomorrow, a lot of us start dry, but then we've got the system coming in, bringing in the rain. The heaviest will be along the south coast. The gustiest winds will be offshore. And north of that, a lot of dry weather, fair bit of sunshine, but still a few showers, especially in the northeast. But again, another chilly day in prospect. So that moves away south overnight Wednesday into Thursday. Then we've got this ridge of high pressure building in, Atlantic weather fronts waiting in the wings. So during the course of Thursday, we could start with a bit of cloud and rain first thing in the southeast. That will move away, and as the high pressure ridge establishes itself, there'll be a lot of calm weather, a fair bit of sunshine around, but also the chance of a few showers coming in the breeze across the northeast of Scotland. Temperatures 5 to about 8 degrees. Then as we head into Friday, again, a fair bit of dry weather around into the weekend. It's worth noting we could see some widespread mist and fog, particularly on Saturday.
Disinformation.
There is no climate.
You think you're winning.
The pandemic wasn't real.
Fooling people in the most sophisticated ways.
From that police. Social media posts.
You fueled hate and confusion. And you make our job seem almost impossible.
Fake news.
Almost. You see, it's because of you we get up in the morning and work through the night, all over the world. The more you try to drown out reality, the harder we'll work to verify the facts. We will find your sleights of hand and expose them. So no matter how hard it gets, we'll never give up. We'll be watching. We'll be ready. It's the pursuit of truth that gives us our calling. The fight for truth is on.
Women. We make up half the world we inhabit, yet take up half the space we deserve. Told we talk too much, yet never heard enough. Told lower your voice, be spoken over, be silenced, be invisible. Women, natural-born storytellers, pearls of wisdom, fighting talk, heart to hearts. All mother tongues, speaking up, speaking out, speaking truth to power, quietly active or loudly roaring. Every woman has a story to tell. Let's hear them. 100 Women, a series of inspiring stories across the BBC. Watch on iPlayer.